The Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industries hosted another successful Prime Minister's Business Breakfast on Friday, the 21st of May, at the Heritage Park Hotel. The guest of honor, Prime Minister Manasseh Sogavare, formally addresses the private business community and SICCI's members during the event.
And on behalf of the Democratic Coalition Government for Advancement, I wish to thank the Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industries for inviting me to attend this morning's breakfast. This occasion every year, I think, provides a space where we can discuss common but important issues and objectives that is pertinent to business development and overall growth in our country. And so probably the way to be organized next time, maybe after this formal, very structured presentation, there has to be some dialogue and that taking place probably in the future. So we have senior government ministers and government officials. That is the only opportunity where we can actually dialogue and then talk about very important issues. Well, ladies and gentlemen, the current global pandemic underscores the important role that this kind of discussion plays in nurturing and strengthening the partnership between the government and the private sector in mapping out the appropriate policies, strategies, and legislations to ensure economic recovery following the adverse effects of COVID-19 in 2020. As you know, following the period of civil conflict that ended in 2003, and we acknowledge the intervention by our Australian friends. That's where true friendship comes in, and we call that mission Helping Friend, and that's where the 13 member countries of the region join hand in hand to rescue a friend that faces difficulties. And so that ended in 2003. Solomon Islands economy grew at an average annual rate of 5.5%. And this relatively strong growth performance marks five key problems. First, growth has declined recently, averaging only 2.9% for the last 4 years, while the population, of course, continues to expand at about 2% per year. And I note that average per capita incomes are still lower today they were before the conflict began nearly 2 decades ago. Second, the biggest driver of growth in the post-conflict period has been logging, which has occurred at a grossly unsustainable rate, and of course is expected to decline sharply during the next decade. Solomon Islands thus faces a pressing need for new sources of growth. But these are highly constrained, of course, by the country's economic geography. Third, poverty remains extensive. I think the statistics, we have nearly 100,000 people still below poverty line in this country. And despite having declined considerably since the end of the conflict, well, available data showed that about 25% of Solomon Islanders still live below the international US $1.90 per person per day poverty line in 2011 and purchasing power parity terms, and of course 56.7% live in less than US $3 $3.10 per person per day. Fourth, of course, providing access to basic services is extraordinarily challenging, given the small population scattered very thinly across this vast archipelago. Fifth, there are major sources of fragility in Solomon Islands, and particularly arising from the limited reach and ineffectiveness to deliver services and development that is very uneven across the space and from climate change. And so the country, the challenge for the country, of course, and as you know, we're still looking for the best method of delivering services to our people. We're not talking about the state government. We're talking about delivering through members of parliament, through the RCDF, NGOs, and that. So we are still looking. So that's another challenge. The government fully realizes, ladies and gentlemen, that Solomon Islands is now at a critical juncture in its development trajectory. And furthermore, the country needs to embark on a transition from logging to a more sustainable source as the key driver of growth. And that's challenging all of us. And people are still asking, and it's the right question, when is the new forestry bill coming to Parliament? And as I said, assured Parliament during the last meeting, that's coming this meeting. And we are putting every fire, yeah, man. I need the minister, please bring the new forestry act to Parliament. Ladies and gentlemen, when the Democratic Coalition government for advancement assumed political office after the 2019 general elections, it recognizes that many of the socio-economic development challenges that had beset the country since independence had not been successfully addressed. I just need to be honest about that. As a nation, we must learn from our past development experiences and plot a development path that is inclusive, workable, robust, and transparent in its implementation. Our development experiences so far has given us two clear lessons. First, if Solomon Islands is to grow and develop into a society that is economically vibrant, sustainable, and prosperous, then we must ensure there is a clear development strategy to guide our policy formulation and implementations, and that is where Chamber of Commerce comes in. The National Development Strategy 2016 to 2035 fulfills this important requirement. I think it needs to be looked at it again, given what has happened to our country. This is not hard and fast, written on stone. It's something that we need to review when there's a need to review, and I think the need to review that is now. Secondly, there must be both political and macroeconomic stability and a conducive business environment whereby policies are implemented and applied in a transparent and level playing field. And I think that's what, we continue to hear that, and please continue to say that to the government by the Chamber of Commerce. However, ladies and gentlemen, the government acknowledges that the task of transforming our people's socio-economic challenges are immense. Our economy is small, highly dispersed, and very vulnerable to international adverse developments. Not only that, but more than half of our population is young and not employed. And you add that to the old people, and there are more dependent people in this country. These challenges are further exacerbated by emerging environmental challenges that pose serious threats to our people's livelihood. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the economy was projected to grow at 2.8% in 2020, relatively lower than the average growth rate in the previous 6 years from 2014 to COVID-19. The government, of course, was fully prepared to implement its policies and programs up to the passage of the 2020 budget. However, as you would know, just when the government was ready to implement its policies and development programs, the unexpected COVID-19 struck. As a result, the economy contracted by 3.6% at the end of 2020. However, the contraction could have been much higher had the government not intervened in mid-2020 and took the necessary corrective measures through its policy redirection strategy. And ladies and gentlemen, the adverse effects of COVID-19 is felt by everyone. And I think this is one thing we can all agree on. Globally, the pandemic is spread with alarming speed, infected millions and brought economic activity to a near standstill as countries impose tight restrictions on movement to halt the spread of the virus. And based on the latest IMF economic reports, the global economy contracted by 3.5% in 2020. The human disruption and the economic damage the COVID-19 had done to us represents the largest economic shock we have experienced in decades since independence. The pandemic had a considerable negative impact on Solomon Islands' economy. It affected all sectors, and the most affected were tourism, private sector business, air transport, and government services, where activities have considerably slowed or in some cases come to a grinding halt. Being a small and open economy, Solomon Islands' international trade was also severely affected in 2020. All commodity exports were badly affected, resulting in drastic declines in export incomes and production as global demand plummeted to a record low. The virus, ladies and gentlemen, had also severely affected both retail and wholesale business, manufacturing, utilities, and government's operation as revenue fall during the year. The pandemic also led to a decline in employment opportunities over the year. Provisional employment data from the National Provident Fund showed that the total number of people employed has also declined significantly. And so, ladies and gentlemen, the overall downturn in economic activity as experienced in 2020 had indeed reversed whatever progress we as a nation have made in the previous years. Putting the economy back on track is a great challenge which needs a combined, concerted effort by the government and the private sector. And the need to work together has never been greater than now. We owe it to our country, people, and future generations to ensure that our efforts keep our economy afloat is strategic and inclusive. Ladies and gentlemen, the government acknowledges that the private sector is the engine of growth, primarily because real economic growth hinges on the creation of and earnings from goods and/or services. As the world mirrors or motors out of the pandemic, private sector development will be vital, especially since many sectors will emerge decimated. The government agrees that for sustained economic development, the private sector needs space to unleash its entrepreneurial potential through creativity and flexibility for innovative solutions. And this is, I think, something that we must continue to talk and work on. And in this regard, it is only right that the private sector, government, and civil society, with crucial assistance from international development partners, proactively participate in accelerating and strengthening the recovery processes. The government took several major policy decisions in 2020 as a result of COVID-19. And I seek your indulgence to briefly discuss these policy decisions. And to ensure macroeconomic stability, the impact of the global pandemic is massive. It's massive and affecting both demand and supply factors of the economy and caused both human and economic disruptions in the country. Based on this view, government had reasoned that macroeconomic policy should not be restricted to conventional measures, but should work in unison with other complementary policies in social protection, public communication, financial and goods market. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, a whole of government approach should be adopted to face both the health and economic emergency posed by COVID-19. The first policy decision was to ensure macroeconomic stability. This was done by reviewing the 2020 budget estimates in the second half of the year based on the economic and fiscal outcomes in the first 6 months. The review exercise showed that there would be a shortfall of more than 450 million in total revenue, or even higher if the adverse effects of the pandemic persisted. The second policy action was that the government prioritized the 2020 budget expenditures across the whole of government. And this fiscal exercise was absolutely necessary in order for government to fund its COVID-19 preparedness and response plan. The savings that resulted from this exercise were derived from a 50% cut in all discretionary and non-essential line items in the recurrent budget and other charges in line budget, and a 15% reduction in all ministries' development projects. And the only exceptions were projects in the economic and productive sectors. The government had also tightened its expenditure control during the year, and these also included ensuring that all procurement of goods, services and contracts were formalized under the appropriate procurement rules and regulations despite the emergency. Now, to help protect jobs and reduce the economic impact of COVID-19, the government also announced the economic stimulus package in May, as you know. The government continues to support private sector development through productive sector redirection policies, investment opportunities crafted under the redirection policies enable small and medium enterprises to mitigate the negative effects in the pathway for recovery and sustainable growth of the economy for better well-beings and livelihoods. The government reaffirms its support to provide safe environment for business developments and continued to support business to recover and stabilize a cash flow in the economy. And as such, the government will assist exporters to increase export volume in 2021 and beyond, and then through well-coordinated and monitored subventions and credit line incentives and the existing small business loan guarantee scheme. The government will also support marketing value chain and logistics to meet international quality assurance standards on local export commodities such as cocoa, copra, sawn timber, fish, noni, and other agricultural root crops. Explore and promote international export and niche markets for higher value domestic products for small and medium enterprises to generate better returns and foreign reserves. And C enables manufacturing industries with the capacity to increase production in value adding and downstream processing that involves local soap, kava processing, noni juice bottling, coconut virgin oil, crude oil, poultry, cocoa, powder, chocolate, fish filleting, and other viable processing products. And in terms of fundamental reforms, ladies and gentlemen, the government is working on the enterprise bill that is intended to encourage, facilitate, and strengthen national economic growth by encouraging private sector participation in business investment and entrepreneurship. Secondly, the Special Economic Zones Bill that will provide incentive to increase investment opportunities and attract foreign direct investment, that is high quality investment into the country. As said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, the government had expected the real GDP growth of 2.8% in 2020, despite the unprecedented economic downturn. The country emerged stronger against the negative impacts of the COVID-19 crisis and ended the 2020 financial year with a revised GDP outcome of negative 3.6%, relatively less compared to the 4.3% contraction forecasted in June 2020. And so the economic outcome, ladies and gentlemen, reflected the gradual pickup in both the forestry and agriculture sectors, where activities gradually improved sooner than, of course, expected. 2021 growth outlook, the real GDP is projected to grow at 1% in 2021. Based on recent economic trend observations, both the services and industry sectors are expected to contribute 0.5% and 0.6% respectively to GDP growth in 2021. Primary sector production, on the other hand, is projected to remain relatively weak in 2021, attributable to the expected fall in log output in the near term. Overall, nominal GDP growth, ladies and gentlemen, is forecasted to rebound to around 4.2% in 2021, and from negative 3.6% in 2021, and it is consistent with the expected recovery in overall economic activities. However, ladies and gentlemen, revenue growth is not expected to keep pace with normal growth over the medium term. Now, this is primarily the result of the expected slowdown in collections of export duties from round log. And as I said earlier, the global slowdown has markedly affected the Solomon Islands economy, resulting in a sharp decline in major commodities exports, particularly fish and in tourism, which is also expected to negatively impact the economy and produce a weaker external position. The current account deficit was around 4% of GDP in 2020 and will continue to widen in 2021. In response to the threats of COVID-19 on tourism, exports, and domestic demand, the IMF had disbursed funds to the Central Bank of Solomon Islands in June 2020 to help cover the urgent balance of payments needs. And despite the lingering external vulnerabilities, logging and other key exports have been relatively strong throughout 2020, while further falls in import oil prices are expected to provide support in 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, the impact of continued decline of logging activity and the expected importation of heavy machinery, infrastructure projects in the pipeline will place significant pressures on external foreign reserves over the medium term. And in 2021, total exports are forecast to slowly pick up in line with projected recovery in the global economy and domestic activity. External demand for all categories of exports, except for round logs, are forecast to rebound. Looking ahead, ladies and gentlemen, total exports are projected to expand by 6.5% in 2020 due to positive contributions from increased agricultural exports, minerals, and fish exports. And total imports, on the other hand, are also forecast to rise because of increased importation of machinery and transportations equipment. Ladies and gentlemen, looking forward, the government's policy response need to change from crisis management to macroeconomic stimulus through the two, although the two are of course connected. Government knows that beyond the relief measures it had taken in 2020, it is crucial that policies to ensure long-term sustainable economic recovery are implemented. And since some policies to stimulate demand act with a lag, policies can be formulated and implemented now in the hope of boosting the economy later. And policy redirections. The government's policy redirection, ladies and gentlemen, is to prioritize budget spending on specific targeted objectives in all sectors, with a specific focus on the productive and resource sectors. The aim, of course, is to support the economy and respond to negative impacts of COVID-19 while maintaining a continued long-term focus on developing Solomon Islands into an economically strong and vibrant nation and advance the livelihood of our people. The government, of course, had decided to redirect its policies after thoroughly reflecting on our past drawbacks and using this experience to set the basis for future growth and further development in our country. Actual government spending on investment projects in both the productive and resource sectors had drastically declined over the last 3 years. Now, for example, in 2018, government spent $557.5 million on investment projects in both the productive and resource sectors. Now, this further declined to $412.5 million in 2019 and to $355.5 million in 2020. And this downturn trend is a concern to the government. Both the productive and resource sectors are important pillars of the economy. If Solomon Islands' economy is to grow and provide jobs for the growing population, then adequate financial resources must be allocated to both the productive and the resource sectors. Now, this explains why, of course, the government has increased budget allocations to both sectors to $580.2 million in 2021. On tax reforms, ladies and gentlemen, the government is aware that the country's current tax system is complex, expensive to administer, includes distortionary exemptions, and relies on high rates applied to a narrow base, which discourages compliance. Getting the tax system right is important as the government seeks higher levels of productive investment to support job creation and sustainable growth. And prior to COVID-19, of course, the government embarked on a tax review to deliver a fair, simple, broad-based type tax system. There are plans to introduce a value-added tax to replace the various taxes like goods tax and sales tax, stamp duties, and customs duties that currently have multiple rates of tax and in different rules and procedures. And in 2020, the government had intended to introduce the tax administration bill in Parliament, but this had to be delayed for 2021 as a result of COVID-19 disruption in the economy. The government looks forward for the passage of this bill, and it would greatly strengthen its revenue administration capacity to support the economic recovery process. And furthermore, the government is fully aware that the delays in the payment of goods and services has direct impact on the private sector. Now, as a result, the government plans to introduce a new payment system called the National Payment System Infrastructure. This will be an automated transfer system, and this should help in the timely government payment to all suppliers of goods, services, and infrastructure projects. Because I've come to as addressed in Barry's, the business growth of the government, ladies and gentlemen, is fully aware that reinvigorating economic growth and ensuring its reliance, sustainability, and inclusiveness are important. Meeting this objective, of course, requires adjusting structural policies to tackle pre-existing weaknesses and those arising from the pandemic. And ultimately, it is the private sector investment that will drive economic growth, not only by adding to the capital stock, but also by increasing entrepreneurial capacity. The government knows that good macroeconomic and fiscal performance in itself may not be adequate if actions is not taken to tackle problems that exacerbate the problems of economic size and geographical situation. In this regard, the government has resolved to tackle the underlying problems of law and order, corruption, infrastructure deficit, developing appropriate financial services, reforming the legal and regulatory systems, and working with the private sector to build dialogue and capacity. Ladies and gentlemen, before concluding, allow me to acknowledge and thank the platinum and gold sponsors of Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industries. I note that the Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industries operational budget is dependent on these sponsors. And I urge all SICCI members to continue to support SICCI. The government has a partnership with SICCI, which is governed by a memorandum of understanding, and the government will continue to engage with private sector through SICCI. And on that note, let me reassure you all that the government values and is committed to this partnership. And as a testament to this commitment, the government will now support SICCI as well. As such, the government will now provide budgetary support to SICCI by including this in each year's national budget under the Ministry of Commerce and Labor and Immigration. I think that's the appropriate place to stop this thing, to stop talking up. Once you receive the clap, that's where you stop it. You might be receiving shouts and that in there. So, ladies and gentlemen, you together for a pathway for recovery. May God bless SICCI. May God bless Solomon Islands from shore to shore.
Thank you, Honorable Prime.
Honorable Prime Minister, Manase Sogovari, other honorable ministers and members of parliament, Your Excellencies, ambassadors, heads of mission, and representatives of the diplomatic corps to Solomon Islands, senior government officials, representatives of statutory authorities, representatives of civil societies, representatives of media, representatives of NGOs, heads of state-owned enterprises, to the friends and members of the Chamber of Commerce, to my fellow Solomon Islanders. It is an honor and privilege to welcome you all this morning and to say a few short remarks. I'll try to keep it short, because let's face it, we're all here to see the Prime Minister and not listen to my boring speech. First of all, Prime Minister, thank you so much for your announcement for the government support towards SICCI. We really do appreciate it. And on behalf of our members of the Chamber of Commerce, thank you. I would wish to acknowledge the Honourable Prime Minister for yet again demonstrating the government and your personal support to the private sector, especially by attending the 2021 Prime Minister's Business Breakfast. Your attendance reaffirms your government's willingness to continue and collaborate with the private sector, and for that we are truly grateful. Honourable Prime Minister, on behalf of the Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industry, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to you, your office, the Oversight Committee, the hardworking law enforcement officers, doctors, nurses, and to all the men and women who have made the sacrifices and commitment to continue and keep Solomon Islands safe. For that, we are truly grateful. Thank you. This Prime Minister's Business Breakfast is an initiative from the Memorandum of Understanding, which was signed in 2017 by you, Mr. Prime Minister, and was later signed again last year by you as well. So thank you. It has become one of the most important events for Somaliland's Chamber of Commerce. It is an opportunity for you to engage directly with our leadership and also creates a platform where the Prime Minister can engage directly with taxpayers. I believe the 2021 Prime Minister's Breakfast is timely and relevant in the context of the current events. It is timely as the world continues to navigate through one of the most devastating global pandemics of our generation. Last year, according to Central Bank of Solomon Islands, saw the growth forecast for Solomon Islands was around -4%, which lucky and thanks to the government, we only managed to get to -3.6, as you've rightly mentioned, Mr. Prime Minister. The current forecast for this year ranges between 1.5 to a more optimistic 4.5 in real GDP growth. This, however, depends heavily, as you mentioned, on the global COVID situation, the gradual opening of borders and the flow of people and the commencement of the highly anticipated infrastructure developments and development. I'm not well versed in economics, but as a business operator, I sometimes feel that these figures are not truly reflective of the sometimes grim realities our businesses are currently facing. Honorable Prime Minister, our relationship, I believe, needs to function beyond politic and commercial interests, and underpinned by a commitment to rebuild this great nation, to provide opportunities for our people, and to fully realize the growth potential. Chamber continues to emphasize on partnership with the government and development partners is crucial for growing businesses that will impact economic growth. The Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce and Industry members have affirmed their willingness to work with the government to support inclusive economic development. We all play a major role in supporting Solomon Islands' aspiration to achieve more inclusive economic development by investing in the productive capacity of the country to create jobs to benefit Solomon Islanders, especially in light of the global pandemic. I believe that the private sector is an important partner. It is clear every time that development cannot occur without any partnership with the private sector. As you have stated so many times, the private sector is the engine of economic growth. The development of private sector directly links to the decisions and policies of the government that encourages growth and create conducive environments for businesses to thrive, innovate, and compete. Towards the end of last year, Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce partnered up with the Economics Association Solomon Islands to produce the private sector pathway for COVID-19 recovery as the basis of the focus for the wider private sector collaboration with the Solomon Island government during its 2020 redirection policy and national budget consultation. The document was finalized and launched earlier this year during our EGM, which I believe you've been given a copy, and all the relevant stakeholders. Most private sector's immediate recommendations to the government is aligned with the main key policies that your government is implementing already. Honorable Prime Minister, I am proud to see that some of the recommendations that we have submitted have been acted upon. I wish to acknowledge your government, the Minister of Mines and Energy, the Solomon Power Board and Management for the tariff reductions that were gazetted earlier this month. Electricity cost has always been one of the most expensive operational costs for businesses, and these reductions are welcoming and timely. We hope that this sets a precedent for other state-owned enterprises to follow. Hope I don't get in trouble with that one. I would like to acknowledge the actions taken by your government to stimulate economic activities and improve productivity via infrastructure spending. Thank you as well to the many developing partners who are here today with us for your contribution towards this infrastructure development. I understand that as we speak, some of these multi-billion-dollar infrastructure activities have been committed to, and I believe some are currently being constructed. This includes the 2023 South Pacific Games project, the Tina Hydro Development Project, the upgrades to the Munda International Airport project, the tassealing of Sege and Taro domestic airports, Henderson International Airport upgrades, fisheries to Henderson Road upgrades and White River Highway roads, and the USB campus project. Infrastructure is often considered to provide a double benefit to the economy. Initially, as a short term as an economic stimulus, which we're in dire need of, and then in the long term from the benefits the new infrastructure provides. Social and economic infrastructure is essential to the sustainable economic growth and poverty alleviation. However, Mr. Prime Minister, we can further maximize the benefits of infrastructure spending if there are policies and regulations in place to promote local content. Focusing on maximizing local content ensures that local workers have jobs that will lead to skill development and transfer of knowledge. The local suppliers will have an opportunity to grow in the market, and the local companies to develop and contribute to revenue that remains in the country and promotes the standards of local private sector. It is vital that the government takes an active approach in ensuring that greatest benefit from these infrastructure developments are retained locally. Therefore, procurement processes should prioritize local businesses, MSMEs. Some countries prioritize local businesses in their tender under the certain monetary thresholds. Likewise, local partnering and minimum local employee requirements can be requirements for a contract given to foreign businesses. Honorable Prime Minister, we believe by creating such regulations and policies to promote local content, we will maximize the potential participation. Otherwise, local businesses will remain spectators in all this infrastructure development. SICCI will also continue to advocate for the fundamental reforms in transport tax that are pivotal to the expansion of businesses, and I'm glad to know that the tax reform is still on the tables, Mr. Prime Minister. This requires partnership, consistent dialogues, and support to ensure that there's a fair and level playing field for all. Honorable Prime Minister, private sector is very hopeful for your announcement on the 23rd of April 2021 on how you've envisioned to closely monitor policy legislation implementation in the Solomon Islands. This is very encouraging to hear from the highest office in the country. This is very relevant because in many areas, Solomon Islands have a strong fit for today regulation and policies. Where we are lacking is enforcement and implementation. As you've mentioned, we're losing around $400 million of their money due to lack of enforcement. Honorable Prime Minister, our country might be small, but there's a lot of opportunities here. Private sector is keen to work with your government to ensure a win-win outcome for both parties through all economic activities. Where we get really constrained is where we do not have the same treatment for all businesses. This impacts the affected businesses, it dilutes the investment climate for entrepreneurs, and stains the social economic system by demonstrating wrong examples where rogue operators thrive. The very latest example was the shipping industry that we've seen foreign competitors are slowly pushing out our local players in the shipping industry. In June 2020, Solomon Islands Chamber of Commerce was privileged to arrange a roundtable involving both the private sector and the government bodies to maximize collection to increase government revenue from operating businesses. In 2020, the Permanent Secretary for Finance shared with the Public Accounts Committee, I quote, "cock the hoe." To tackle leakages of government revenues, that was a clear call to enforce all legal standards for operating businesses in the Solomon Islands. We do not need new fancy legislations, Mr. Prime Minister. We need enforcement. We need fair tax collection from all operating parties. We need to closely watch and corrective measures so that money does not get out of this country, rather gets reinvested. It is important to note that we look forward to your government support to the local businesses, to let local businesses thrive in the Solomon Islands. Because all the local businesses are here to stay, Mr. Prime Minister, and work hand in hand with you and your government towards the path of developing and progressing under the theme, You Me Together. Honorable Prime Minister, you have been a great patron for the commercial sector. Therefore, it is important to note that in the current unprecedented times where the whole world is suffering from economical challenges, it is imperative for us to protect our local businesses, the private sectors in general, and with the view to protect local employment. This will ensure that money circulates to the grassroots level in the rural economies and allow Solomon Islanders to survive, if not thrive, in such trying times. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, moving forward, we must be clear on what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve it, and when we want it achieved. The challenge before us is to focus on policies on the key sectors that will broaden our base, create jobs, boost productivity through infrastructure and educational investment, and to undergo structural and legislative reforms to improve governance and strengthening public service. We look forward for the opportunities to further strengthen our relationship. As a key stakeholder in the economy, we would like to reaffirm our position in supporting the government, policies, delivery and implementation, with respect, Honorable Prime Minister, we also look forward to your kind considerations to some of the concerns that has been raised today. On that note, thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister, for gracing us with your presence, Honorable Minister, Permanent Secretary, and all the heads of diplomatic corps. And may God continue to bless our beautiful Solomon Islands from shore to shore. Thank you.
Also, as part of the program, the Prime Minister had the opportunity to mix, mingle, and meet members during the breakfast event. Hosted annually, the Prime Minister's Business Breakfast is one of the very important events on the SICCI calendar every year.